The Price of Neglect. David Parker is a successful businessman in New York, running a chain of upscale restaurants. His schedule is packed with meetings, deals, and luxurious parties. Every morning, he jogs through Central Park, but his mind is always on work. When his wife, Sarah, calls, he looks at the screen but doesn't answer. He tells himself he will call back later, but he never does. Sarah used to understand his dedication to work, but over the years, she has grown weary. Their conversations have become brief and transactional, mostly about bills, household matters, and Michael's schooling. There were nights when she stayed up waiting for him, only to hear the door creak open at midnight, followed by his hurried footsteps straight to the bedroom. One evening, as David arrives home late, Sarah stands at the kitchen counter, stirring a pot of soup. "David, can we talk?" she asks softly. "Not now, Sarah. I'm exhausted," he replies, tossing his coat onto a chair and heading straight to his study. Sarah watches him disappear into the room, sighing. Another evening passes in silence. Sarah, once a lively and independent woman, now feels like a ghost in her own home. She spends her evenings sitting by the fireplace, reminiscing about the early days of their marriage when David would surprise her with flowers or take her out for spontaneous dinners. Those days feel like a distant dream. At dinner, she sits alone at the long dining table, absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone, hoping for a message from David. But the only notifications she receives are from news apps and promotional emails. Michael, their son, is rarely home. He has learned not to expect his father at his soccer games or school recitals. At 16, he has already built a life outside of his family, friends, video games, and a future that he hopes will take him far from this house filled with unspoken words. One evening, as Sarah and Michael sit at the dinner table, she attempts conversation. "Michael, how was school today?" "Fine," he mutters without looking up from his phone. "And your friends? How's Jason?" Michael shrugs. "He's okay." Sarah sighs, feeling the same distance she feels with David now creeping into her relationship with her son. Michael gets accepted to a university in California, far from New York. Sarah is proud yet heartbroken. She knows this means she will be truly alone in the house. On the day of Michael's departure, Sarah hugs him tightly, trying to hold back tears. "Call me when you land. Okay?" "I will, Mom," he says softly. David, standing a few feet away, simply pats his son's shoulder and says, "I'll send your tuition on time." Michael nods but avoids eye contact. On the flight, he feels no regret about leaving home. Sarah starts feeling increasingly weak. At first, she dismisses it as stress or fatigue. But one afternoon, while grocery shopping, she suddenly feels lightheaded and has to grip the shopping cart to keep from collapsing. A week later, she visits her doctor, who warns her of early signs of heart failure and advises her to rest. "You need to reduce stress." "Sarah, have you been under a lot of emotional strain lately?" the doctor asks gently. Sarah forces a smile. "Just the usual." That evening, she tells David about the diagnosis, hoping he will show concern. "You should take a vacation. I'll cover all the expenses," he says absent-mindedly, checking his phone. Sarah grips her glass tightly. "David, I don't need a vacation. I need you to be here." David sighs. "Sarah, I'm doing my best. Everything I do is for this family." Sarah looks at him, realizing that in his mind, financial support equals love, but what she truly needs, his time. His presence, seems impossible to ask for. One morning, Sarah collapses in the kitchen. The housekeeper finds her and calls an ambulance. The doctors work tirelessly to stabilize her, but the damage is severe. David receives a call while in an important business meeting. When he sees the hospital's number on his phone screen, he hesitates. A second later, he excuses himself and rushes out. When he arrives at the hospital, the doctor shakes his head. "We did our best. I'm sorry." David stands frozen, his mind struggling to process the words. Guilt seeps into his chest like a slow poison. Michael returns for his mother's funeral. He sees his father standing by the casket, looking lost. "You were never there when Mom needed you," Michael says, his voice cold. Now it's too late. David looks at his son, searching for words, but none come. For the first time in his life, he feels truly powerless. After the funeral, David returns to his empty house. The silence is deafening. He picks up an old family photo from the mantel, Sarah, Michael, and himself, all smiling. He realizes that he had everything, but he was too blind to see it. A week later, he books a flight to California and knocks on Michael's apartment door. His son opens the door and stares at him. "I want to start over if you'll give me a chance," David says, his voice raw with emotion. Michael hesitates, then steps aside, letting his father in. For the first time in years, they truly talk.